Hi everyone, this is Sharan. Welcome to my channel. The topic for today is visualization using Pandas. So we are not going to use any special libraries, just Pandas, and see how we are able to visualize data. So before going into the tutorial, as usual, like why visualization is important for us. So if you see the whiteboard behind me, on the top there is one data which is represented in a tabular format, and the same is represented in a chart as well. Right, as you see, the one that is represented in the chart is very intuitive. So our brains are being wired in such a way that if we see a visual, we would be able to get, or we would be able to grasp the information like very quickly, rather than having all the details in a tabular format or maybe in a paragraph or whatever it may be. So visualization is the key in order to communicate the results in any data science project. If you see, the very important aspect is communicating the results or insights to the business stakeholders or to the relevant stakeholders. So in doing those communications, it's very important for us to use the right visualizations so that all the information that are intended to be communicated to the stakeholders passed on to the stakeholders like very quickly, and they are able to grasp the concepts quickly then and there. Also, like if you see the trend charts, like there is one in the bottom as well. Like whenever there is a trend or a time series data, when we have a visual data, it's easy for us to understand or get the pattern. So maybe when you are going to work on a huge amount, like a huge data set, when you try to do all these visualizations, it helps in better understanding the data. If there is any pattern that is present in the data, it will clearly come out in these visualizations. So that's why visualizations are really important, and let's get into the visualizations and then see how to implement them or how to build various charts. So before going into the tutorial, like as usual, the fact for today is about Earth again. So the Earth's diameter is about 12,800 kilometer. So that is when you draw an imaginary line like along the equator, the diameter would measure 12,800 kilometers, which makes Earth as the fifth largest planet. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are still bigger than Earth. Yep, so let's get into the tutorial. As usual, I'm going to import the Pandas library because all the visualization that we are going to see is part of Pandas. And the other key point is Pandas as such doesn't have an visualization capability. But you might have a question now, like if Pandas is not having the visualization capability, like how can it be used for plotting various charts? That's a good question. Like the answer to it is even though Pandas is not having an visualization capability on its own, so here what would happen is here whenever we use the plot function, so what happens is it is kind of acting as an wrapper. So even though like for us it seems like Pandas is being used, so in the backend Pandas is actually calling the Matplotlib library in order to make all those visualizations. So if you don't have Matplotlib library installed, so then what would happen is when you try to use Pandas and make these plots, there would be an error that is coming up. So even though you are not required to import Matplotlib library in your code here, so you are just going to import only Pandas. But since Pandas is going to call the Matplotlib library, it needs to be installed and it should be made available for Pandas to access. So while doing any of these plots, like if you get any error, so maybe you need to close the windows where you are working on, go into the Anaconda command prompt and install Matplotlib library, and then if you restart and make these plots, it should work perfectly fine. Okay, now going into the data. So what we are going to do is we are going to go back to the old search trend dataset that we were using in like last maybe in the past few days in order to understand the various functionalities of Pandas. So what we are going to do is we are going to create two sets of data. So one with the whole data, and then the other one is a smaller subset of data. So depending upon the visualization, like whichever data set would make sense and would be visually more appealing or easier for us to understand, so we will be using that particular data set accordingly. So now let me read the data. So this is the same data that has been used in the previous videos. So if you have any questions about this particular data set, maybe you can go back and check out all the previous videos where we have used this to get an understanding about what it is. So this is a search trend store, so being downloaded from Doodle's search trend dataset. So for various weeks, for various terms, how was the search or the trend store for each one of them. So having said that, so let's check out various plots. So these are all various plots that are available. We are going to see one by one, and then we are going to see how useful is each one of them in order to us to get a better understanding about the data. So first, let me use the plot. So when I use a plot, so it takes some time, and as you see here, it's able to plot for all the columns, like for example, all the topics that we have, depending upon the first column, which is nothing but the date. So it has around 260 data points, 260 weeks of data, maybe close to 5 or 5+ years, and we are able to clearly see the search trend. So we can see, like using this visualization, we are able to clearly see for the blue one, which is e-learning, there is a pattern, like it peaks up at certain point, goes down, and it peaks up again, goes down, and so on. And you can see in the recent past, the e-learning has been peaked, like the scores have been almost doubled. So it's very understandable that under the COVID situation in the last few months, it's almost like everywhere it's e-learning. So the trend store has been doubled in the last few months, and we can also see that there is a clear pattern, that it peaks up in a particular time period and goes down and peaks up. Whereas in case of others like data science, machine learning, AI, or deep learning, what you can see is there isn't any cyclic behavior, like there isn't any ups and downs. Whereas slowly since maybe 2015, I think that's when the data point starts, and it's steadily increasing. There are like few dips, and but it's overall it's been increasing in that increasing trend. So using this visualization, like otherwise, like having a look into the raw data as such, like as you see on my screen, it's very difficult to get a sense of what's happening. It's even very difficult to understand how is one topic in relation with the other. Whereas in this visualization, when you do a simple plot, we are able to clearly get some patterns and insights out of it. So now what we can do is, for e-learning, it's peaking at certain point and then it's going down. So we can try to understand much deeper, like what's happening. Is there any cyclic behavior, like in an year, or maybe once in 6 months, does it have a peak and does it have a bottom? Like we can get to understand like which are all the months when it goes up and goes down. So that helps in understanding the data set much more better. So when we are going to use these for maybe any prediction for the future, so then these information would be really helpful for us, because like we can use then the right attributes for our model for making the predictions. So that's how maybe the plot is really important. It clearly brings up all the patterns that is present in the data. So moving on to the next one. Next one is a bar chart. So let me execute it. So here you can see that so what I'm doing is I'm using t_data. So this is the shorter version of the data, which is I'm having the data only for 20 weeks, and I'm able to plot the bar chart. So here the advantage here is, for each and every single period, we are able to clearly see the scores for various topics. So this helps in understanding whether there is any pattern. If it is a case where each and every single group has a different pattern, we can see what's the trend among all the topics for that particular group. So this can be used for any data set as such. Whenever there is some kind of a grouping, so we can see what's the pattern within the groups and how different groups are compared with each other. Like, is there any weird behavior or any drastic changes will be clearly visible in this data point. Moving on to the next one, which is the stacked bar chart. Like here, what we are doing is, instead of having them as a separate bars for each and every single topic, we are going to stack them on top of each other. So here we are able to clearly see that So e-learning certainly outperforms all of them. So this also tells us that maybe e-learning, the store that we have for e-learning, it's slightly skewed, meaning that maybe the stores are generally higher. So maybe if we want to normalize them, if we want to normalize all the stores, then we can use a normalize function to ensure that whenever there is a huge range for a particular attribute, we normalize and make it equal, or normalize all the attributes and make sure that each one of them is comparable with the other one. So so this helps us in providing these kinds of insights, like what is present in the data. Is one attribute like outperforming the other, or is there any pattern significantly catching? So that's why like visualizations are used, and all these visualizations that I show here are from Pandas. Like I'm not, as you see, I'm not importing any visualization here. I'm just using Pandas, but in reality what's happening is it's using Matplotlib library. So Matplotlib library should also be installed in your system. So this is the horizontal representation of the same chart. So and next one is an area chart. So here this is very similar to the scattered bar chart, whereas here it is we are able to clearly see the areas, like which one is occupying the maximum space. Like we can clearly see e-learning store or stores are definitely way higher than the other topics. So either it is very popular or maybe it's skewed. So it clearly, this data set clearly shows us. And next one is the bots plot. So bots plot is really important to understand the range of the data attributes. For each and every topic, we are able to see where the median is, and where is the 25th and 75th percentiles are, and what's the actual range, and whether there is any outliers. So here what we can see is, we can clearly see there is a large number of outliers for e-learning. So either maybe that these could be a data quality issue, like not in this actual case. Like whenever you do this plot and then when you find a large number of outliers, generally it means that there could be some data quality issues or any like very rare behaviors. So those kind of rare behavior should generally be removed from the data set before using it into the model. Or what we can do is, all these outliers can be separately stored as a separate data set, and maybe a separate model can be built it. Because when your data set is having a large number of outliers, which means that these are all not a normal behavior, but the behavior that happens extremely rarely. And when you use all those data set into the model for making the prediction or making the forecasting, it would skew the results. So it's better to remove all these kind of rare behavior or rare events from the data set and then use a much cleaner data. So from the bots plot, we are able to clearly see that there are some kind of an outliers for one of the columns here, so which needs some kind of a treatment. So here the names are not clearly visible, it's all overlapping. So instead of this, like if we plot them horizontally, so if we say vertical is equal to false, so then what happens is we are able to plot it horizontally. The names are all very clear now, and we are able to clearly see the outliers, and that's it. And the last one is about scatter plot. So let's say we want to understand the relationship between two attributes. When one score increases, what happens to the other? So then it's best, or it would be clearly visible when we use a scatter plot. So as you see here, like I'm checking whether there is any relationship between machine learning and data science. So as you see, what's happening is, as the machine learning, the store for machine learning increases, the store for data science also tend to increases. We can clearly see, if you draw a line on these points, you would be able to see a line like this, like going from the bottom here to the top here. So which means that as the store for machine learning increases, the store for data science also increases. So whenever we have attributes that are highly correlated with each other, so then it would make sense for us to remove one of them, because like if we have all highly correlated attributes together, so then in a model, then it might impact the performance of the model. So as a general rule of thumb, so we do the correlation check, and all attributes that are highly correlated with each other those will be considered as duplicates, and then those will be removed. Only one will be taken up as a source and then will be used in the model as such. So that's how like these visualizations will be useful. So as you have seen, that these visualization is very helpful for us to better understand the data and plan the analysis accordingly. Also, these visualizations will be extremely useful for us to use this for communicating the insights to the various stakeholders. So instead of spending time and explaining them what's happening, one good visualization will be very simple and will be easier to understand, rather than spending like a huge amount of time in it trying to explain like various patterns. So that's it about visualization. So for today there isn't any exercise to do, but it would be really good if you can pick up and data from the title website, and if you can repeat all these visualizations and then see what's happening. So because visualizations are again like it's going to be really important in any data science project, so it's good if you can spend some time and understand these concepts best. I hope you have learned something today. If you have learned something interesting today, please give a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to get a notification of any new videos. If you think this would be really useful for any of your friends, please share it with them. And as I always say, it's always better to learn data science in a group, so that even if you are missing a particular concept, your friends or will be able to if they are able to grasp those concepts, they can explain you, or like by learning in a team, you can ensure that your learning curve is very steep. So that's it for today, and see you in the next session.